Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we will be talking about how Kamala Harris is completely changing the 2024 race, and this is perfectly demonstrated in these brand new polls that we have, mainly from the New York Times with partnership with Siena College. So in this new poll conducted just yesterday, my dad was actually part of this poll. They asked him, they said they were from the New York Times and Siena College, and whatever, they asked him the questions, and this was just yesterday, and the poll came out today. So what the results of this poll show is that Donald Trump retains his lead. He had, a lead for months and months and months over Joe Biden in the New York Times poll, so he has kept his lead even with Kamala Harris in the race. However, it is far closer than it was when Biden was the presumptive Democratic nominee, when Biden was the Democratic candidate. So what does this poll show? Among likely voters, Donald Trump leads Kamala Harris, 48% for Trump, 47% for Harris. So only a 1-point lead. That is well within the margin of error, so Kamala Harris may very well be winning. But among registered voters, just voters who are registered to vote, may or may not actually vote come Election Day, Donald Trump is at 48%, and Kamala Harris is at 46%, but still within the margin of error, so Kamala Harris could very well be leading here as well. So that is what that's what the matchup shows. Donald Trump leads by 1% among likely voters, 2% among registered voters, and that's huge, and we're going to get to it in a bit. But the other question, the unfavorable or favorable of these two candidates, Donald Trump in February, let's just look at this here. In February, Donald Trump was at 44% favorable. He has risen to 48% favorable. He was, whatever, we won't go into unfavorable right now because it's unnecessary. But he was at 44% in February, 48% now in July. In February, Kamala Harris was at 36%, well below Trump, and now she is just as popular as Trump also, almost, at 46%. Then we have Joe Biden. Joe Biden at 38% in February, 43% in July. Now you see that all three of these candidates rose, which I guess wouldn't make sense. But it does because, as we approach Election Day, as we get closer to Election Day, people will become more partisan, even though they might not want to admit it. A few months ago, they might have been willing to admit that they don't approve of the president of Biden, even though they are a Democrat. But as they get closer to Election Day, they know these polls matter, so they do want to help the president and their party to say that they do approve of him. So that all makes sense. But just look at the spike here, the rise of all three of these people, really. Donald Trump rose 4% since July. Joe Biden rose 5%. And then we see Kamala Harris rose 10% favorability. I mean, that is historic. This is only a few months, and Kamala Harris has now become more popular than Joe Biden. While, throughout his presidency, there was this narrative, and this was reflected in every single poll, that Kamala Harris was deeply unpopular, extremely unpopular, well less popular than Joe Biden. That was the narrative. That's what everyone believed because that's what every single poll said. However, today, after, Joe Biden was forced out of the presidential race because of really how little chance he had against Trump, Kamala Harris is now more favorable more favorable than Joe Biden. So people have formed an opinion of her now, and it is a favorable one. Whatever she has been able to do in these past few days has helped because let's just look at these, I was able to find the last New York Times Siena College poll taken before Joe Biden dropped out. So here they are. These are national numbers. These are national general election numbers. Now look at the date. This was June 28th through July 2nd. So these polls were taken after the debate, kind of shortly before he dropped out, a week or two before he dropped out. So they conducted 4 polls, 2 with third-party candidates, 2 head-to-head. In the, I'll just go through them. In the first poll, Donald Trump led by 5%. In the next one, Donald Trump led by 6%. Trump led by 7%. And then Trump led by 8%. 5, 6, 7, 8. These are national numbers. I will mind you, Joe Biden won the popular vote in 2020 by some 4%. So if Donald Trump were to win the popular vote by 8%, that would be a national 12-point shift to the right. What would that mean? That would mean every single swing state would easily go to Donald Trump. Easily. That's Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. And what that would also mean is that some states that we consider blue, but they're a little close, like New Mexico, Minnesota, Nebraska, 2nd, Virginia, Maine, and New Hampshire, would all flip to Trump. And that would mean states like New Jersey become competitive, Colorado, Oregon become competitive, that we haven't seen competitive in whatever, 30, 35 years, I don't know. So what that would result in would be an absolute red wave, a bloodbath for Joe Biden if the nation really did shift 12 points to the right. So, Trump winning by 8%, even 5%, that is a national 9-point shift towards the right. Just a truly, incredible shift that in 4 years that we, hadn't seen before in decades, truly decades. So swapping Harris was clearly the right move because Joe Biden was in, for a very, very bad night on election night. But what we see in these new Harris versus Trump polls is that he only leads by 1% and 2%. 1% and 2%. That is still a loss for Harris because for Democrats to win the electoral vote, they probably have to win the popular vote by around somewhere at least 2% or more. So she still has work to do, but this is still a close race. I mean, heck, this is a winnable race, really. Especially looking at the likely voters numbers. The Democrats can't, it is still a possibility that they just about tie with the Republicans in the popular vote, but still they are able to win the electoral vote if they run a smart campaign. So, if looking at this electoral map, considering how much things have changed, the New York Times has Kamala Harris doing about 5% or 6% on average nationwide better than Joe Biden was doing before he dropped out. So, let's say if this was your electoral map, before Joe Biden dropped out, this was somewhere close to mine. I had Trump winning every swing state. That's Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. I had New Mexico, Minnesota, Nebraska 2nd, New Hampshire, and Maine at large all lean for Joe Biden, which is a 1 to 5 point victory. Very small margin. But Donald Trump wins by a lot, 312 to 226. So if Kamala Harris is truly doing around 5 to 6 points better than Joe Biden nationwide, is, I'm not saying this will happen, obviously, but, based off logic, I'm just trying to make a point here. This is not a prediction or anything. That would mean that, states like Wisconsin, if you thought it was going to Trump by 4 points, Kamala Harris wins that one by a point. If you thought Michigan was going to Trump by about 1 point, we'll say, then that would be a Kamala plus 4 state. If you thought Trump would win Pennsylvania by 3, Kamala wins it by 2. And, that same situation goes for Arizona, Nevada. Maybe she can flip Georgia, or not flip, but keep Georgia in the Democratic column to a lean margin. And just as importantly, what that means, and this is very apparent in some of the new polls that we're seeing, but Kamala Harris does not have to try as hard in some of these blue states that were looking like critical swing states in 2024. Truly battleground states, 50-50 battleground states in 2024, when Biden was the presumptive Democratic nominee. For example, polls had Donald Trump leading in Maine. They had Donald Trump leading in New Hampshire. He led in the aggregate of polls in Minnesota and Virginia for some time. New Mexico was looking increasingly close. So Kamala Harris, especially because she will perform much better than Biden would in these urban, very Democratic areas, she can really run up her numbers in these blue states, and she doesn't have to try as hard in some of these states as it was looking like Biden would do. Like Minnesota, that becomes near safe. New Mexico, near safe. Deep likely margins. New Hampshire. Maine looks good for her. So she doesn't have to put time, resources, and money into these blue states like Biden would have had, which, takes attention away from the states that actually would matter in any normal election, which are the 7 swing states that I outlined before. Finally, on that point, the UNH, and the University of New Hampshire, UNH, conducted a survey in New Hampshire and Maine, and what we see is really astonishing. In New Hampshire, in the two-way matchup, Kamala Harris is ahead by 7 over Donald Trump. In the three-way with RFK Jr., she's ahead by 6. In Maine, it gets even better. In Maine, in the head-to-head, Harris is ahead by 9, and when you include third parties, she is ahead by 8%. So you've got Kamala Harris leading by 7 and 9 in the head-to-head matchups in New Hampshire and Maine, respectively. Now, when you look back at the 2020 results, I don't have them up, but I do have them memorized. Joe Biden won New Hampshire by about 7.5% in 2020, and he won Maine at large by 9.1%, I believe. So Kamala Harris is matching 2020 Biden numbers. She is winning by about how much Joe Biden is winning. So if she would be able to replicate something like that nationwide, then she would be able to win the election, because Joe Biden won 6 of the 7 battleground states in 2020. If Harris can run near these numbers, she is in the states of New Hampshire and Maine. If she can do that across the battleground states, then she wins the election. These polls were really, really astonishing. I mean, especially because there was a poll not too long ago. It might have been even before the debate, I think, but it had Donald Trump leading in New Hampshire by, I think, 2 or 3 points. Now, again, Biden won New Hampshire by 7 in 2020. That'd be a 10-point shift to the right. But Harris, for whatever reason, New Hampshire and Maine are overwhelmingly white states. The narrative was that Harris wouldn't do well among white voters. I don't know how accurate this poll is, but if it's anywhere near accurate, then, white voters is not a problem for Kamala Harris. She can win them too. So Kamala Harris is doing something really astonishing, something incredible that I think that, if the Democrats knew was possible for Kamala Harris, then they would have done the swap out a lot sooner than they did on, last Sunday it was. So, this is a whole new ballgame. Kamala Harris making this race a lot closer. I am going to come out with a prediction either tonight or tomorrow, so stay tuned for that. So thank you all for watching this video. If you enjoyed, make sure to subscribe down below. It helps out a lot. We're trying to get to 10,000 subscribers. That's the goal. Drop a like if you enjoyed. Drop a comment, to let me hear your thoughts, and I will see you all next time.